Well, hello, welcome everyone. It's awesome to see you guys here. We have people joining from all over the world. For those of you that I haven't met, my name is Chris Frost. I'm one of the managing partners of Leadership MetaFormation, and we have my partner Todd Olson here. He's another one of the managing partners, and then you guys, if you're on this call, you probably know either Tony Stoltzfus, who's the founder of MetaFormation, or Dave Smith, who is the leader of Bethel Coaching and one of the founders of Bethel Coaching. And so we're really excited that you guys are here and participating in this webinar today. I just wanted to start out with just a quick intro on how we came up with this idea. With MetaFormation, we were having a discussion one day, and Todd mentioned how he wanted to potentially do a webinar on vision casting. And I said, well, hey, I just saw an article from Dave Smith on exactly this and how he incorporated asking Jesus questions into his vision planning, rather than, a lot of times what we do is make our plans and say, God bless them. But instead, Dave went through a different process and was like, okay, Jesus, what? Yeah, well, he'll share his process with you in a little bit. And so I said, what if we did something together? Because MetaFormation and Bethel Coaching have worked together for a long time. And we thought, well, wouldn't that be great just to, instead of doing things separately, why don't we do things together and just try to bless as many people as we can, and just give something to you that we really believe and hope is going to bless you and actually make 2020 incredible, because you're going to walk it out with Jesus. And so I just want to mention, this is being recorded. And so if you want to go back to it after the webinar, we are going to send you a link so you can download this and re-listen to it if you want, or if you want to share it with anyone as well. Feel free, obviously, to take notes, but we're going to send you a PDF that has kind of the main bullet points, the questions we asked Jesus, and how you can continue to apply this afterwards. So that'll get sent out just after this webinar. So without any further ado, I'll bring on Tony and Dave. And oh, I lost you, Dave. Where did you go here? I'll find you on my screen, and you can kind of share how you came up with this, and just some of your backstory, Dave, on this whole thing. Yeah.
Sure. I'll kind of just set it up here for everybody. Typically every year I try to do some form of reflecting and planning for the new year. And, that might look a little bit different each year, but this year I was looking over kind of all the things I had set out to accomplish for, I think, 2021, and realized I had like 38, goals or things I wanted to accomplish, and was looking over the list and saw that I only had about 10 of those that I actually completed. I know that was pretty ambitious, but as I was sitting before the Lord for looking at the past year, 2021, and looking forward to 2022, I really didn't want to create another list of things that probably wouldn't get accomplished on another list. So I really didn't know where to go, honestly. And so I just sat there before the Lord, and I heard this question come to the surface for me, and it was this: what questions do I want to ask Jesus about 2022? And so as I began just to put that question before the Lord, I felt like one question after another began to come to me, until I had 5 questions written down, and I had listened and heard Jesus' response to each one of those 5 questions. And it was, I don't know, it was just a very, very refreshing experience for me. Instead of having a to-do list that I'd created for 2022, I felt like literally Jesus had invited me into a space with himself to experience more of him for this coming year. And it just put me in a place where wow, this is new. It feels good. It feels refreshing. It feels like an invitation. And what come out of that in terms of what I heard Jesus say to me again was just, it filled a spot in me that was very, very desire filling and just a brand new approach in how I ever look at a new year coming up. So that's kind of where it all started, Chris. That's kind of where it all began for me.
Great. So what we're going to do is take you through those 5 questions and let you have a chance to experience Jesus speaking to you about your upcoming year. Before we do that, a lot of you probably are familiar with the questions for Jesus thing. Some of you are not. By the way, when I scrolled through the list of people, I saw lots of familiar names and faces, and I wanted to greet you all. So hi, everybody. I wish I could speak to you all personally. Anyway, the idea of questions for Jesus is that most of the time as Christians, we ask questions about the business of being a Christian, not about our relationship to Jesus or to Abba. So a business question might sound like, Jesus, what do you want me to do today? And I realized a number of years ago that that was pretty much all the way that I prayed. My prayers were all about the business and very little about the relationship. And when I switched the way I prayed, my percentage of times my prayers got answered went up about 1,000%. And I sort of realized, oh, this is the kind of dialogue you're actually looking for with me. It's not so much about what are you doing right and wrong? What are the rules? What do you need to be doing today? But who am I to you and who are you to me?
Yeah.
So, the business question I gave you, what do you want me to do today? Business questions usually have the word do in them. So let me give you a question for Jesus, a different kind of question, and we're going to try asking that one and see what we get. So the question is, Jesus, what do you like about walking through my day with me? So instead of asking him what we're supposed to do, we're going to ask him about how he experiences our relationship. So I'll give you like 45 seconds or a minute to hear. I've found that if you listen too long, you just wrap yourself up in knots. And basically your job is, as you listen, then whatever comes into your heart, to your mind, if you see a picture, if you get some kind of sense or an emotion, jot it down in the chat window and we'll see what Jesus is saying to each of us. So let's pray this question. Jesus, what do you like about just walking with me through my day? Okay, so now whatever came into your heart, whatever you saw or sensed, don't try to figure it out. Just put it in the chat and then we'll look at it. And once you're done writing your own, you can read what other people are seeing. That's good. Part of the reason we ask these kind of questions is we're not trying to figure out what our theology is. We're trying to let God as a person, Jesus as a person, impact our hearts and connect with our hearts. So like for me, I felt like Jesus said, I like eating with you because eating means fellowship. And I was sort of like, oh, I think I could have read the Bible for a long time and never thought of that. So when you ask Jesus these kind of simple questions about you and him, you get interesting answers. So looks like you did really good. There are tons of answers here, and a lot of them are really significant and fun.
Yeah, great.
So Dave, so let's transition to Dave's questions. And what you'll do is we'll give you a question, you'll listen, and then have a chance to jot down what you heard from Jesus. So tell us about the first question that Jesus gave you.
Yeah, the first question I heard was this: Jesus, what aspect of yourself do you want me to experience more fully this year? We have it up there on the screen for you. So that was the very first question I heard. And do you want me to go in, Tony, with what I heard the Lord say to me around that? Or
well, why don't you just give us a sentence or two about what that question means to you, or why would you ask that question?
Okay, that's great. Well, I believe Jesus is always ready and willing to disclose himself to us, and to make his home with us. And so I feel like coming to a place of experiencing him, again, our life in Christ is to be an experience. It's not to be just based on knowledge or information. It's to be based on an encounter, an experience of him. That's what the word means, to know God. It's this deeply intimate knowledge of him. And so the more that I get to know him and the various aspects of him, he's such a incredibly wide and broad and deep person, and there's so much about him to get to know. So he's always has this invitation out to us. He wants to come and disclose himself to us, to those of us that love him. And so this invitation to me was like, wow, there's going to be an aspect of Jesus I get to know more at a personal, experiential level this year than I have ever known about him in this particular way before. So that's what that question was about for me.
Okay. Just quick note here, at the end of this, we're going to give you a document that has all the questions on it, so you don't have to write them down. You can just focus on your responses. So let's take a minute and just ask Jesus this question. And once you get an answer, something comes into your mind or your heart, we'll take another minute or two to write it down. So Jesus, what aspect of yourself do you want me to experience more fully this year? So once you're getting something, go ahead and take a few minutes and write it down. since this is for your future reference, maybe you want to write it in a Word document or something. And then if you want to paste it into the chat, you can do that too. But that way you'll have a record of it. Are you all ready for the next question? Okay. So Dave, what was the second question that came to you?
Yeah, the second question I heard Jesus pose for me was this one. Jesus, what adventure do you want to go on with me this year?
And say just a little bit about why
Yeah.
adventure. What does that mean?
Yeah, I found this question to be kind of interesting and fun, Tony, as I heard that come from the Lord. And yeah, actually, his response was even more intriguing to me. And I won't share his response around that question for me right now. But it communicated to me that it's not just all about work with Jesus. It's not just all about seriousness. It's about having fun. It's about having adventure. It's about doing things with him in all kinds of different ways. And I have no idea what this adventure holds for me coming up, but it has left me with a great deal of anticipation for what the Lord has in store for me. So it just brought out another dimension, I think, for me, my relationship with Jesus. So.
Okay. So let's ask him this question. Jesus, what adventure do you want to go on with me this year? By the way, you can ask Jesus follow-up questions too. We'll take another minute or two to journal.
Okay.
Okay. By the way, the wording of these questions are about something Jesus is going to do for you, not something that you're going to do for Jesus. So this isn't a to-do list. It's a looking forward to an adventure list. So Dave, what's the third question that you had?
Yeah, third question that I heard was this one: Jesus, what part of my heart do you want to most profoundly impact this year? You know, it's all about the heart with Jesus, and this is where he does. I've often said this is where God does his signature work in our life, is really with our heart. And our heart is really comprised of, one of the things that comprises our heart is that of desires, places that we deeply desire something. And I believe that God cares about what we care about in that regard. So again, that was an interesting question. And I knew out of it, God wanted to touch a very specific place in me. That was a cry of my heart this year. So.
Okay. Great. So now this time when we ask the question, let's ask him a follow-up based on something he says. So for instance, one of the responses I see to the last question was the adventure was climbing to new heights in the spirit. So a follow-up question might be, Jesus, tell me about those new heights. What are they going to look like? So you get to make up your own follow-up question. So Chris, put the starter up on the board there. So let's ask him this: Jesus, what part of my heart do you want to most profoundly impact this year? So make sure and take one part of his answer and ask him a follow-up question. All right, let's do number 4. Dave, tell us about that question.
Yes, the fourth question that I heard Jesus have me ask him was this one. Jesus, what aspect of your kingdom do you want me to more fully experience this year? I felt like this was a little different from the first question about him personally. This was about his kingdom, but represents him, obviously. I just feel like, obviously entry point into the kingdom is a bit narrow, but once we enter into the kingdom, it's a vast land, a better country, as the writer of Hebrews writes. And so I just felt like God was inviting me into experiencing more of the vastness of his kingdom. And as I was asking that question, there was some particular things that were a response from his heart, very specific things that he wanted me to experience this year around his kingdom. So that was the fourth question.
Okay, great. So put that one up, Chris. And we'll do a follow-up question again on this one. So Jesus, what aspect of your kingdom do you want me to more fully experience this year? All right. How about the last one, Dave?
Yeah, the final question was this one. Jesus, in my partnership with you, where are you directing my focus for this year? I just believe focus is an important thing for our life, and having and maintaining the right focus, I think, is key for our own personal success in a given season. So that was a really challenging question, but very, very helpful for me to focus in on.
Okay. All right. So let's do this one. Jesus, in my partnership with you, where are you directing me to focus this year? Okay. So we're going to get a chance to share more interactively here. Chris, you want to take us into that part?
Yeah, so thanks, Tony and Dave, for leading us through that. What we're going to do is we're going to break you up into triads, so groups of 3. And what we'd like you to do is just share on what Jesus spoke to you about and whatever was most significant to you. So you're going to get 5 minutes each to share on what was most significant about what Jesus said. So that could be one question, it could be all the questions, depending on how long you take to speak. But what I'd encourage you to do is remember conversational generosity, right? So only take your 5 minutes, because the next person has something really profound that they heard from Jesus too. So make sure to give them space to share. And what they share might actually really impact you as well. So in your groups, you'll see after 5 minutes, there'll be something that comes across the screen to say to switch to person 2 or switch to person 3. So just if you can honor that, even if you're in the middle of something, just wrap it up quick and move to the next person. That way everyone gets a chance to share. Awesome. So Todd, you want to take us into the breakout rooms?
Yeah.
All right. Well, welcome back, everyone. This is one of my favorite Zoom features, that we can pull everyone out from breakout rooms. Like, if you've been to any in-person workshops and we have to say, okay, come on back, everyone. It's my favorite feature of Zoom, that we can bring you back muted and we're ready to go, to stay on time. So hopefully everyone had enough time to answer and share what they had with Jesus. But just in wrapping up, I just wanted to ask, so feel free to unmute yourself. But how is this planning with Jesus different than what you've done in the past for planning? So I'm just curious to hear from one or two of you.
I'd share.
Yeah. What's your name? Sorry.
Mary.
Mary?
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, thanks, Mary.
So just curiously, I was telling my group that I have a vision board, that usually every year I do something with pictures and affirmations and scriptures. And weirdly, this year I didn't get to do that. It was like, it's not happening. It didn't happen last year either, but that was because of the state my heart was in. But this year I was all ready, and I just felt like the Lord says, just buy these pictures. And so sitting here, one of the answers had to do with an evolution of process. And he said that because I kept seeing these ugly pictures up there going, they're not my color. The words don't make sense to me. I got them because you told me to, but I feel like the pictures are actually going to evolve through these answers. Does that make sense? Like,
yeah,
this was really powerfully placed timely for me.
Oh, that's really cool.
So
That's
thank
awesome,
you.
Mary. Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. That's really cool. So someone else, how is planning with Jesus different? Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Anita. Yeah.
Well, I became a secular coach in 2000, but quickly I found Tony's work because I knew there was something missing. And it's the old culture versus kingdom spiritual battle. I decided I had to coach and teach through my Christian faith, or I wasn't being authentic, and yet asking other people to be authentic. So
Mhm.
do you start with Jesus or do you start with yourself? And it's
Right.
that culture battle, you know. So
Yeah.
this is really fun. I've read 2 or 3 of his books, and I teach for an institute and use his books. So I appreciate you, Tony. You've influenced my life well, and I'm getting pretty old. So son, thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Anita. Why don't we hear from one more? How is this idea of planning with Jesus different than what you've done in the past? One more person.
Hey, Chris.
Yeah.
I
Hey,
can
Peter.
share that. Hi. I sit down with a book in January or at the end of, and the book is 10, 15 years old now. And I just, I pray. I've been praying up and knowing until I'm going to sit down. And then I write all the vision goals, just simple goals. I want to take this. I want to graduate here. I want my family to experience this, all those out. So it's a combination of maybe the rational and the and goal planning, but it's specific. There are goals that are, I want to accomplish this. I want to graduate from
Mhm.
MetaFormation. I want to go on a cruise and so forth. So this differs in that it's more, is the word esoteric correct, or
Mhm.
meta? And it touches the heart. This goes deeper, and it touches the relationship, and it touches the heart, and it
Mhm.
says, hey, all that other stuff is great, but what are you going to do to work on your heart? And so that's how this changes the whole thing. The other things will now outflow from a changed heart, instead of trying to meet those things, making sure my desire is to acquire. Now
Mhm.
my desire is to serve the relationship, and grow to do those things if they come about.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great, Peter. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, and I found a similar experience. You know, we were planning this, and I had these questions beforehand. But if I'm honest, I didn't ask the questions until we had time to ask the questions right now, and it was like, oh yeah, right. I have all of these great ideas for myself and goals for myself to achieve. But yeah, when I look at what Jesus told me, it was like, okay, there's some deep things in my heart that he wants to work on and that he wants to reveal this year, which makes it a lot more exciting and engaging. And so what the last question or the last thought I'll leave you with is, what do we do with all of this information? You know, Jesus just told us all of this stuff. How do we take it? And if you've been in any of, I know Bethel Coaching talks about this, and we talk about this in MetaFormation, this idea of leaning in. And a lot of times what we do when Jesus tells us something really profound, and he kind of gives us some insight into what he's doing or where he wants to take us, we're like, oh, Jesus, that's awesome. Thank you. I got it from here. And then we go and we take over the process, right? And we're like, you know, we all of a sudden Jesus gives us some insight, and for whatever reason we think, well, we know best. And so instead, leaning in, the idea with leaning in is, okay, God, if this is what you're doing and this is what you're calling me into, how do I engage with you in the process? How do I, if circumstances are what form me, how do I engage in these circumstances that you've put before me to allow that change to happen in my life? Because you've probably, not probably, you've been arranging these circumstances for years to get me to this point, to bring me into something. So instead of me taking over the process or saying, I don't like that process, how do I actually step into it and engage it and allow you to work on my heart and bring me further than I ever thought possible, because I'm engaging with you in the process? And so the document that we're going to send you has some real practical steps on how to continue to lean in to what Jesus has to say to you. So that'll be coming to you sometime within the next 24 hours with this recording. So yeah, we're at the top of our hour. Todd, Tony, Dave, was there anything else that you wanted to add just in closing?
Real quickly, in the materials that we send out to you as well, I'll make a copy of the chat. And so you'll have a chance to see not only what you wrote, but also what other people wrote around each of the 5 questions.
Yeah, I was just inspired to hear the responses from some of you folks as I was going down through the chat, as well as I was able to sit in on one of the breakout rooms and hear from a couple of ladies about what they heard from the Lord. It just was really inspiring. and so vast and so broad in terms of all the different types of responses that Jesus gave each of you. That was really enjoying listening into that.
Chris, I don't know if you need to go somewhere, if this is possible, but I'd be happy to hang out on here for a bit, and if people have questions or whatever.
Yeah, well, why don't we, oh, I guess we can leave the recording going. Sure, yeah. So if you need to go, this is the time we kind of committed to, right, for an hour. So feel free to take off. But if Tony wants to stay and answer questions, then you're welcome to stay and ask questions.
I'm on sabbatical, so I don't have anything else I have to do today.
Tony's calendar is wide open.
I have a question for Tony,
Okay,
if I may.
go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, like, Tony, you're like one of the person that I know that knows Jesus really well. I mean, you have a special relationship with Jesus. And I would love to hear what aspect of Jesus is that you have discovered lately, and what was your process of discovering that?
Oh, well, the last several years have been quite painful ones for us, with some things I can't talk about, our house burning down and a bunch of other stuff. But one of the things that I've been tuning into is just that one of the unmet desires over that time for me was for comfort. And I was sitting out on the deck, it was like 55. So I was out there, but I had a blanket over me and sort of snuggled up, and the wind was blowing, and I was enjoying the wind hitting my face, and just, haven't had time to just sit there and do nothing. And it just occurred to me that, I think this was God speaking to me, that I need to just let myself experience things like that, because I can be so in my head. So for me, a lot of my biggest learnings have not come from sitting there with my Bible or whatever, but through experiences that I've had that God then speaks to me about, or I meet him in. So I'm starting this quest to figure out how I can receive comfort from God more effectively, because I'm not very good at it. So, yeah. Anybody got a question about what we were talking about today for me or Dave or?
Well, I would ask, like, Dave, when you got these answers, what did you practically with actions do with them? I'm just curious. That would be helpful for me just to hear a process answer.
Sure, I appreciate that question, Mary. I think our response depends on what Jesus actually said to us. And, that response, I feel like there's always a response on our end. When God initiates something in our life, he does something, he speaks to us in some way, there's to be a response. And so for me, Mary, as I've been looking at the responses I've gotten from Jesus, one thing I've been doing, I feel like I'm supposed to be going back periodically. I wrote all this down, by the way, in my journal. Okay, I wrote his question down. I wrote the responses down. So I'm revisiting those responses in my journal, because I feel like the Lord has more for me to glean out of his response. So that's one thing I'm doing. Part of, most of these responses to me, Mary, felt like a gift, felt like something that God was just giving me. But even receiving something requires something on our end. Okay, we have to have our heart open. There has to be a response, even to receive. The Bible says, we're supposed to become like little children to enter the kingdom. And so I want to have this response of a child as I just sit before the Lord and receive what he says he wants to give. There's one response in particular, I think, to that last question that he gave me. that probably is going to require a little bit more intentionality maybe on my part, just to kind of lean into it. What specifically, how can I, partner with him in this? What does my partnership look like with Jesus in this? And so, as I go through this year, kind of unpacking those responses, listening more deeply, I feel like there's going to be things coming out of that perhaps the Lord will be asking of me. But some of these I'm just waiting to receive purely as a gift. I don't think there's going to be a whole lot on my end other than keeping my heart open, remaining expectant of what God is going to be doing in faith. Faith is not a passive thing, it's an active thing on my part. So in response to your question, that's kind of where I'm standing right now, Mary.
Thank you.
You bet.
I have a question. So do you find as you work through the questions that it kind of requires you to slow down a little bit? I find for myself personally, I know I can feel like I have to rush to get to the answer, but I can see where maybe you'd find that you needed to pull back some and slow down a bit.
Is that question directed for me?
Yes.
Diana?
I'm sorry. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think that we can hear well if we're not in a place of stillness. Scripture says, be still and know that I'm God. There's some things that we can only receive from the Lord in stillness. And so, yeah, it's fairly easy for me to sit quietly and kind of in this reflective place. That's partly how I'm wired, for one. I love those times when I'm just being able to be alone in a distraction-free environment, and I have the time just to be quiet and be before the Lord and listen. So I do personally believe it takes a space of being unhurried and just being able to be still before the Lord and listen to what he has to say.
That's
Absolutely.
good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, my mind is always going off in 86 different directions at once. So usually when I'm doing this kind of thing, I have to sort of, oh yeah, I need to stop. And
Yeah, I hear that, Tony, and I've been in that place too at times where I've had a lot of different things going on in my mind, and it just takes a little bit of just kind of shutting those things down. It might take a while to shut those things down. I even sometimes have to make a list. If something comes to my mind that I need to do, if I put it on a list, then I can put it out of my mind for that period of time. But appreciate that. So. Thanks for that question, Diane.
what else do you want to talk about?
Yeah, Dave, I have a question. This is Clarice.
Yes, please.
How do you feel about not having the usual lists that you would have at the beginning of the year? Because it's kind of different having just these answers and having these to go throughout the year.
That's a great question. I feel obviously a bit of relief for one, that I don't have a big to-do list for this year. And Clarice, I do believe that there'll be things that, I'll still be focused on in terms of accomplishments and those things I want to accomplish. But I'm starting my year from this position of just receiving what Jesus has spoken to me. And, I run an organization called Bethel Coaching. So I'm at the helm of something that I have to keep running, and there's decisions and things to do. And I also have my own coaching business. So there's things to do in that as well. But like I said before, this approach has been extremely refreshing for me. And it's been more desire filling than any other approach that I've had in the past. And so I'm just delighted that that question arose for me about what questions I want to ask Jesus for going into this year. You know, so I'm not against goal setting. I just feel like many times our goal setting is self-initiated and it's kind of divorced and not in alignment with where God is at work in our life currently.
Tony,
Can
can I
I
ask you a
ask a
question?
Sure.
Yeah, both of you
Cheryl.
talk at the same time.
It was like stereo. Maybe it's the same question. Tony, I'm just wondering, like your courses, your book, The Invitation, and all the other books have been life-changing for me and so many other people. Is there anything that you're working on now that we can look forward to, or that you would be able to share on? Or I'm just thinking, like, what's beyond this?
Sure.
I don't know. Just curious.
Well, okay. Well, the main thing I'm working on right now is a project I'm calling How to Read the Bible Like a Human Being. But I realized that I learned how to read the Bible, you know, as a kid and, you know, in my 20s and 30s. I learned how to read the Bible to know what to believe and how to behave. So it was a fairly rational process, and it was very directed toward how are you going to walk this out? But it wasn't very relational, and it didn't engage my emotional brain, so it often didn't impact me. So what I'm doing is developing a method to study the Bible that focuses on visualization, tuning into the feelings of the characters, and then creating stories of the people in it. So right now I'm working on the turning water into wine story. So I spent 3 weeks looking up arcane details and all kinds of stuff about it, but I decided at the end, the narrative I write about it, I'm going to write it from the servant's point of view. So the servants in that, there. No. The servants in that story, the Greek word is diakonos, which is where we get the word deacon, but they were probably like hired hands who were working for a few days to put the wedding on. And the lowest social class in Roman society at that time was day laborers. Even slaves had a higher status than people like that because they were in a constant survival battle. They never knew where the next meal was coming from. And a lot of people in Roman times actually sold themselves into slavery because they couldn't survive in that mode. So what's it like for the servants in this banquet? Dang, now my other phone is ringing. So what's it like for the servants in this thing? And in the parable, Mary is there saying they don't have any wine. The servants aren't telling the master of the ceremonies. Why not? Well, they're probably terrified because one good possibility is that they were the ones that were supposed to buy the wine and they didn't buy enough. And this was an enormous social embarrassment for people. So when you start unpacking the culture, what's going on with the different characters, so Jesus, by making wine in this story, is saving the livelihoods of the hired people in that story who, you know, what happened to the rest of the wine? Did one of them steal the money for it? Did they make a big mistake? Did they, you know, and part of the cool thing about this methodology, I also learned in studying the Bible that you have to do it right. You have to rightly divide the word of God. You can't speculate. You can't use your imagination because every point of it has to be perfect. And so what's happened to us is we don't put ourselves in the story because we aren't sure. But with your emotional brain, it doesn't matter if you're sure or not. It's horseshoes and hand grenades. So I'm really enjoying this. I've got several test groups that are working through things now, but eventually there'll be a emotional brain Bible study thing to pair with questions for Jesus as ways to take two of the main spiritual disciplines and engage the whole person. So anyway, that's the biggest thing I'm working on right now.
Thank you. That's so exciting.
I'm
Look
having
forward to
fun.
it.
I'll try again.
Okay.
This is for you, Tony, and for Dave, if you're still here, and anybody else on the panel that would like to answer. I just noticed this year, and thank you for this heart question stuff. When I did my normal journaling at the end of the year, looking back, reflecting, being thankful, looking forward, seeing what came true that I thought was going to happen last year, that I was feeling the Lord was on. I was actually a little bit surprised at how much processing I did writing out in my journals, how much pain there was from last year and the year before. Not like you, Tony. I've been praying for you, just hearing that you had lost your house, and hopefully you've got a new place to live and such. But just the pain in the world, the pain of just everything that's happened. And when we love our countries and praying for our countries, it's rough stuff. And so I'm just wondering, I'm thankful for these like more heart questions, because I processed and went, wow, actually that year was worse than I thought it was. And I feel like I need healing in my heart. So do you have any other healing questions? Tony, you mentioned comfort, just knowing you need comfort from the Lord. Any of those healing of the heart kind of questions? Just curious.
Well, Dave, maybe you can respond to this one too. I guess I would say, the first thing I'm going to want to do is try to figure out what did I lose? What desire was taken from me? Where was I hurt? How was I hurt? And then you can go to Jesus and say, Jesus, this got taken away from me. I felt like it really sucked. How do you feel about it? Were you ever in this kind of position before? And if I can identify a place where he was, like for instance, so this year my best friend just moved away, and my second closest friend here in town is also moving away shortly. So Jesus, did you ever lose friends like John the Baptist, who was maybe your cousin, and you saw every year when you went to the temple because he lived pretty close to there? How did you handle that? What did you talk to Father about when John died? I know you had to get away by yourself. And you can have a conversation with Jesus about your shared suffering, which I find really, I think one of the things, the first thing we want when we're suffering is for it to stop. But we go a little deeper than that, and we want to know that we're seen, that somebody notices that we're suffering. We want someone to be with us in the difficult moment. And so those kinds of things, as you talk to Jesus about your shared sufferings, you can discover new sides of him and also meet in him the thing that you need. One other piece of this that I've discovered when you're suffering is if you ask Jesus why, he'll almost never tell you.
Yeah.
Because it's not what your heart really wants. That's the answer that you want so that you can protect yourself from it happening again.
Yeah.
So yeah. Dave, do you want to add anything or?
Well, those were great questions, Tony. You're so good at coming up with those kinds of questions. I would just say this, that our tendency as human beings is to run from our pain. It's to try to even medicate it, perhaps at times. Where I've found in my life, the most helpful thing is for me to lean into it and to engage that pain with Jesus. to be authentic and real about it, and to engage my heart with his around it. One of the most painful times that I walked through in my life was a number of years ago, when a wife of 17 years just walked out of my life, and my life came crashing down around me, as well as my two kids, who their mom left them as well, pretty much at the same time. And, engaging my heart with the Lord through that process and through that time and season of my life, what made all the difference in what came out of that season for me. As I look back on that season, it was a deeply shaping experience, and primarily because, by the grace of God, I was able to engage my heart deeply with him. I came to a place of experiencing his comfort and his grace and his reforming of my heart in many, many ways through that time. So I would just add to Tony saying, don't run away from the difficulties and pain that we're experiencing. Lean into them, but engage your heart with Jesus around those things, because he is our healer. He's our comforter. He's he fulfills those desires of our heart. That would be my addition to that.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You bet.
Somebody else? What else is on your mind?
Let me say this, it's just been a joy to pour into you guys, okay? It's just been a joy for me to invest in just a little way in this webinar, pouring into you, maybe giving you a little bit of a different perspective on how to approach a new year, and to involve your heart with the Lord and engage him in that process. So thank you for allowing me to be a part of this.
I'll add one other thing to that question about suffering. I think the best thing that I've ever done in life is to not give up. You get to the place where I've been to places where I didn't have any hope anymore. I couldn't visualize the future, but I don't know if it's stubborn or what. There's this part of me that's just, I'm not going to, even though I don't know how to hope anymore, even though I can't see any way out of this, I'm just not going to give up. And, I look back at my life and see people who I walked with and knew that have plateaued or whatever, and what's the difference? Why am I here and they're there? And sometimes it isn't anything more than just not giving up. So yeah, it's sometimes we look for these amazing answers, and
yeah,
the answer is really simple. It's just hard. So
yeah, I think of that statement. I don't know what evangelist or revivalist said it, but he was walking down the street one day and he saw someone he knew that was in a drunken stupor, and he just made a comment. He said, "There, but for the grace of God, go I." And just realizing that our life is a work of grace. We're here in the place we are in our relationship we have with God because of his deep grace upon our life.
yeah. So how about one more question? We'll call it a day. Who will be the last?
I have a question. I have some hesitation in asking it, but
Patty.
one of these answers I felt a real resistance to, And so just wondering what to do with that.
Resistance in what sense?
Resistance in what the answer to the question was.
But like in the sense of, I'm not sure this is God kind of resistance, or I
No,
think this
more
is
like,
God, but I want to do this resistance, or
more like, I know that's you, Lord, but I don't like your answer.
and what can you identify what you don't like about it?
Yeah, there's a letting go piece of it.
Mhm. Well, do you want to do a little 3-minute coaching thing here? So the question
I have some resistance to saying yes to that.
Okay, I'll give you a question for Jesus, and you can decide whether you want to answer it here or somewhere else.
All right.
But the question would be, Jesus, if I let go of this, what will you give me in return?
It seems a pretty safe question to ask.
It was supposed to be.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, joy.
All right. And what's your follow-up question for that? What would you want to know about that joy?
Like how soon after I let go, Lord?
Okay, ask him.
I hear him saying, what about before you let go? Yeah, just a sense that maybe that's an indicator of the timing.
Okay. Okay.
And it'll be a joyful thought.
Does that give you enough to go on to take it further?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, it's good to see your face. Just a quick note, a principle behind that is we love him because he first loved us. So when someone comes up against something that's difficult to let go, my application of that scripture is we let go because of what he gives us in return. We don't just let go to be empty, we let go to be filled. So I think I sort of grew up with this idea that it was godly to be empty and I should give up everything with no idea that I'd ever get anything in return. And I don't think Jesus is that nasty. So if you meet that kind of resistance, you're coaching someone in that kind of situation, I'd be asking a question like I asked Patty. So Jesus, what are you going to give me why is it worth doing this? I know in the abstract that you want to make my life better, but can you give me a little information here? So anyway, that's sort of what I was doing.
Good.
All right, I'm going to check out.
Yeah, I need to go too. Thank you so much, everybody. Hopefully we'll see you later.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye now.
Thank
you.
you.